Welcome everyone, this is Sean with MTG808 Jr., and today we're going to be taking a look at the top 4 deck lists from our most recent Youth Standard Pauper tournament that took place on October 13th over at Minikyu in Mililani. This was our first time partnering with Minikyu, so thank you to Minikyu. Shout out to Mike Ulip for setting up the tournament and running it, and we look forward to running more tournaments with them in the future. It's great to see the project growing, to see the club advisors stepping up to help, grow the project, and I'm very excited about the direction that all of this is going. So this was our first time playing with Guilds of Ravnica. So this is our first look at the new metagame since rotation happened. But before we jump into that, though, just want to cover a couple of announcements. So this perfect little baby girl, Lily Reiko Tamanaha Pottinger, was born on October 9th, and she is now the center of my world, and becoming a father has been great. I absolutely love it. Every single cliche that you hear about becoming a father is absolutely true, and it's wonderful and magical, and priorities might be shifting a little bit. I'm going to do my best to keep up with the channel and keep up with the project, but my life has completely changed, and I just thought everybody should know. So welcome Lily Reiko Tamanaha Pottinger to the world. Most beautiful, perfect baby ever to exist. I'm completely biased in that regard. All right, moving forward with our calendar of events, this video will likely be posted on 10/20, which means that tomorrow, 10/21, is going to be our next Youth Standard Pauper tournament over at Westside Comics and Games in Kapolei. Then our next, I think we're going to have one more at Minikyu in November. It has not been confirmed yet, but keep your eyes peeled for that. We are going to have November 4th, Youth Standard Pauper over at The Planet in town, and then again November 24th, Youth Standard Pauper at The Planet in town, and all that is ramping up to our Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament, which is going to be December 1st. We will be giving away $500 in scholarship to first place and $250 in scholarship to second place, so hope to see you all there, hope to have a good turnout, and hope to see some really good games of Magic being played. So that is our calendar of events. And jumping over here to our top 4, we had Skylar playing green-black Death Touch coming 4th, Eddie playing mono-red Aggro coming 3rd, JP playing mono-green Stompy coming in 2nd, and then Jansen down here playing mono-black Death Touch, who came in 1st. So we're going to be taking a look at all of their deck lists, and of course all of their deck lists are going to be linked to a text description in the description of this video, but we are going to be hopping over here to Magic Online to take a look at the deck list. Alright, so this is Jansen's first place mono-black Death Touch deck. Basically, when rotation happens, the card pool gets smaller, the power level of all the decks in general tend to go down, and you usually, at the beginning of a format like this, you have people kind of gravitate to aggro decks, and we definitely saw that happen here with this top 4 metagame. So this is a mono-black aggro deck. It's just playing a bunch of solid creatures and a bunch of solid removal. A ton of these creatures just so happen to have Death Touch, so they end up trading up really well. This deck does also have a pretty good attrition game plan, right? If you want to grind your opponent out of cards. Burglar Rat. When Burglar Rat enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card, and Dusk Legion Zealot, of course, draws you a card when it comes into play. So these 2/2-drops kind of allow you to play a little bit of a longer game, try to run your opponent out of cards, and then your Death Touch guys and your removal just trade so efficiently with them, you end up going 1-for-1 and then hope to just outvalue them as the game goes on. The big finisher in this deck is Veiled Shade, 3 mana, 2/2. Pay a black and a colorless. Veiled Shade gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So this is a really good mana sink for the deck, right? The curve of this deck is really low. The most expensive card costs 3. And so, once you dump your hand into play, you use all your removal, you play out all your creatures. If you have a Veiled Shade in play, then all the mana that you have in play is not going to go to waste. So, this is a generally good game plan, right? We see a bunch of efficient removal. Deadweight is a new addition. It's a reprint, but it is a new addition to the Standard Pauper metagame. 1 black enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets -2/-2. So, that trades with almost everything. That's cheap. Fungal Infection we've seen be an all-star. One thing to consider in this slot would be Skullduggery, since you're playing a ton of creatures. Skullduggery might be better than Fungal Infection in some situations, so it's worth considering. And then Moment of Craving is kind of the marquee. Moment of Craving and Murder are kind of the two marquee black removal spells in the format. They're just so efficient at what they do. Moment of Craving, of course, kills a creature, gains you some life, helps you win a race, and then Murder, being able to straight up answer any creature for 3 mana. Very, very efficient here. So we see some great removal backing up a solid curve of creatures. And then the last couple cards in the deck here. Vicious Rumors is a new addition from Guilds of Ravnica. 1 black sorcery. Vicious Rumors deals 1 damage to each opponent, and each opponent discards a card, then puts the top card of their library into their graveyard, and you gain a life. So you're getting a lot of very, very small effects for 1 mana. Of course, the most impactful effect is that they discard a card. So you are trading 1 for 1 with this, and then assuming that they have cards in their hand, you're trading 1 for 1 for this, and then you're dealing a damage and gaining a life. So, this is a solid card. I was not at this tournament, so I did not get to see Jansen play this card at all. So my gut tells me that this card is not the most exciting, but I could be wrong. A 1 mana 1 for 1 that gives you a little bit of extra value. It might be good enough. I'm skeptical, but I am open to being corrected on that. We will have to see. And then, of course, Soul Salvage, great top deck in the late game, and then Never Happened. He is playing 61 cards in his main deck, so I'm not sure how good this Never Happened is. If he wants to keep the 61 cards, then maybe just playing another Vicious Rumors, I don't know. But Never Happened, getting to exile a card is very relevant for breaking up the Soul Salvage loops that the control decks are trying to do. So Never Happened is a pretty solid card in the metagame, although I'm not sure if it necessarily belongs in the main deck. So this is a solid mono black aggro deck. He's got a solid sideboard. We won't go into too much detail on that here, but I think the next video I'm going to make is going to be my take on mono black aggro, kind of loosely based on Jansen's list. I do think that Moodmark Painter goes really, really good with these Death Touch creatures, so I think trying to build more around that. Here, Moodmark Painter. 4 mana, 2/3. When Moodmark Painter enters the battlefield, target creature gets Menace and +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So giving your Death Touch creatures Menace means that if they're either going to take a ton of damage from Moodmark Painter bumping them up, or they have to block with 2 creatures, and then Death Touch will take out both creatures. So I think Moodmark Painter is kind of worth building around in this archetype, and I think it's worth exploring. So the next video I post after this will be me revisiting this archetype. But let's move on to our second place deck. Congratulations once again to Jansen. I think this was the first time he's won a tournament, so 5th grader from August Aaron, so congrats to Jansen. All right, here we have Mono Green, Stompy, played by JP. This deck has kind of surprised me as well. Again, I said the formula for a successful deck, and especially in the beginning of a format, is just a solid curve backed up by solid removal. In the case of green, instead of solid removal, we just have a ton of really efficient pump spells. Might of the Masses, of course, it is an uncommon in Guilds of Ravnica, but it was a common before, so it is legal in Standard Pauper, at least as far as our rules are concerned. But, 1 green, instant target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature you control. This deck is playing a bunch of creatures and pump spells, so Might of the Masses is going to be very strong. Titanic Growth, of course, 2 mana for target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. Means that you're going to be winning pretty much any combat where you cast Titanic Growth once your creatures are blocked or blocking, or it might just be 2 mana, deal an extra 4 damage to their head, which is very relevant for an aggro deck. And then I really like this addition, Talons of Wildwood from M19. We haven't seen anyone use it before, but with so much pump spells in the deck, giving your creatures trample is very, very relevant. So 2 mana, aura, enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has trample. And then, of course, if this card is in your graveyard, you can pay 3 to return Talons of Wildwood from your graveyard to your hand. So a slew of pump spells and then a bunch of efficient creatures. A lot of these are just very solid creatures that we've seen in many green aggro decks before, right? Yavimaya Shepherd and Jungleborn Pioneer are probably the best green 3-drops that you have. Deeproot Warrior, we've seen this card be very successful in the blue-green Merfolk deck, but you know, it's just as good in mono green. Guildgrove Stalker is an interesting one. We haven't seen Merfolk playing this guy before because Merfolk was playing Shaper's Apprentice in this slot, but since we're not playing blue, I think that this is a very reasonable inclusion. You know, it will run past the majority of other early game creatures, which is a very relevant ability. And then, of course, Llanowar Elves. Goes without saying, that card is great. And then Jungle Delver gives you a way to sink your mana in the late game, so between Jungle Delver and Talons of Wildwood, you will always have stuff to do with your mana, hopefully. And then the last card here, Jade Bearer. We haven't played this in the Merfolk lists that we've seen, but especially since this list is playing Might of the Masses and you're just incentivized to play a whole bunch of cheap creatures, I think Jade Bearer is a reasonable inclusion in this deck. The only non-Merfolk creatures in the deck are Yavimaya Shepherd, the Saproling that it makes, and then, of course, Llanowar Elves. So Jade Bearer pumps up almost all of the creatures in the deck. You know, it's cheap. It provides a bonus when it comes into play, and then, of course, it's an extra body for Might of Masses. And then, to top off the curve, we have 2 Jade Guardians. So, you know, again, a solid aggro deck, great mana, right? Mono-colored means you have great mana. You have a very solid curve of creatures, and then a slew of supporting spells. So, congratulations to JP for coming in second place. Next up, we have... Eddie came in third, so mono red aggro here. Again, a mono-colored aggro deck, full of very awesome creatures, great creature curve, and then Eddie is playing a ton of supporting spells. So let me just pull these out here. All right, so scooch this over. We have 8 pump spells that Eddie is playing, 8 cheap pump spells for him to win combat when his opponents block, and then 12 cheap spot removal cards for him to keep his opponents from blocking at all costs. He is a little bit light on creatures, 20 creatures, but that's a reasonable amount. Because his curve is so low and he, you know, is playing so many cheap cards that are pretty high impact, he is able to get away with playing only 18 lands. And this deck looks very solid. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed 2 of these. So he has actually 14 spot removal cards to support his creatures. So 20 creatures, 22 spells to support them, and then 18 lands. So, yeah, this deck is pretty solid. Keldon Overseer, 3 mana, 3/1 haste. I don't know how many times he's kicked this. You need 7 lands in play, which is, you know, not quite half the lands that are in your deck, but it's pretty close to half. So yeah, I don't know how often this gets kicked, but just a 3 mana 3/1 haste is pretty solid, especially if your goal is to just keep the opponent's board clear or just pump up your creatures, right? So all these cards are pretty stock. The only one that we haven't really seen used before, but which makes a lot of sense, is Fervent Strike. 1 red, instant, target creature gets +1/+0 and gains First Strike and Haste until end of turn. First Strike and Haste is, you know, it's a fair amount. So a bunch of his creatures already have haste, but you know, that's a fair amount of abilities for 1 mana. First Strike means that it's going to pretty much win any combat that, well, not any combat, but a lot of the combats that the creature is going to be in. So you're trading essentially your 1 mana instant for their creature, right? Which is great tempo. And then you know, it's just a very solid card. So shout out to Eddie. Yeah, this is the second time we've seen him make the elimination rounds playing mono red, so congrats. All right. No, not over here. And then the 4th place deck, here we have Green-Black Death Touch played by Skylar. This is pretty similar to the Mono-Black Death Touch deck that we saw, but this deck goes a little bit bigger, right? The Mono-Black Death Touch deck was playing slightly lower curve and a little bit more spot removal. But this deck is playing some bigger creatures, right? So we have the 8 1-mana Death Touch creatures. We have Burglar Rat. Since it's an aggro deck, I'm curious if Dusk Legion Zealot would be better in this slot, since making sure that you have gas flowing is, I think, better in an aggro deck than trying to deny your opponent's cards, but I could be wrong. Deeproot Warrior, we've seen, is just a really solid, strong 2-drop. We've got 8 3-mana Death Touchers. And then we have some 4-drops to really give the deck a little extra muscle. Gravedigger, well, I guess Gravedigger gives the deck card advantage, so that this deck can kind of play the long game. And then Rhizome Lurcher is a really interesting one. So this is from Guilds of Ravnica, green, black, 2 colorless for a fungus zombie, 2/2. Undergrowth, Rhizome Lurcher enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. This deck is playing 29 creatures. And a lot of them have Death Touch, so you are incentivized to kind of trade off your creatures, and then you just end up with a whole bunch of them in your graveyard, and you might just have a huge Rhizome Lurcher. Assuming that you curve out, you go turn 1 Hired Poisoner, turn 2 Burglar Rat, or Deeproot Warrior, turn 3 Daggerback Basilisk. On turn 4, if you attack with all of them, offer your opponent good trades, they trade, you're going to have a 4-mana 4/4 or a 4-mana 5/5 pretty reasonably on turn 4. So I think this guy is pretty powerful. And then, of course, in the late game, he can get to be huge. Yeah. Congrats to Skylar. I think this is his first time making the playoff rounds, so congrats to him. 25 lands seems like a lot for this archetype. I think he can shave on some. He is playing 64 cards in his main deck. But yeah, I think that this is a pretty solid deck. I would be very curious to see if Moodmark Painter is better than Gravedigger in this deck, and I would also be very curious to see if what's it called? Talons of Wildwood, the one that we saw in JP's deck, that gives trample. It seems really strong with Rhizome Lurcher, or just these Death Touch creatures. Death Touch and trample is a nasty combination. All right, so that is it for today. That's our top 4 deck lists from our tournament. Congratulations to our top 4 finishers. And then stay tuned. I will be outlining my build of mono black aggro based loosely on Jansen's deck for our next deck tech. And thanks for stopping by. If you want to support Youth Magic here on Oahu, please consider becoming a Patreon subscriber. I know I've been saying it for a couple months now, but we finally have ordered the playmats. I'll be making a video and posting on that in the next, as soon as I can get to it. We'll see. But there are going to be a few extra perks for becoming a Patreon contributor. And then, of course, you will be supporting awesome Youth Standard Pauper content. You will be supporting Youth Magic here on Oahu. And just helping us do all the good things that we do. So please consider becoming a Patreon subscriber if you want to support the project or support the content. Of course, just watching the videos, liking the videos, subscribing to the channel is a great way to support. And I hope that you guys found this insightful. Thanks for stopping by, and catch you later. Peace.